Hi, it's Kirby Summers. Today is Saturday, April the 6th. Do me a favor, give this a like, subscribe. This is a podcast for everyone who listens to me on YouTube and to welcome those of you who have joined me recently. So I kind of am going to give you a preview of the fact that I watched the supposed new Epstein Netflix film. Now they're making movies clearly because they need to reinforce a false narrative. I watched Scoop on Netflix, which premiered yesterday, and I watched it so you don't have to. You don't have to waste your time. I'm going to tell you about it. Basically, it's really only about the so-called behind the scenes story of the women who negotiated with the Buckingham Palace establishment to sort of secure the scoop of the decade, um, which was basically the interview that Emily Maitlis conducted in November of 2019 with Prince Andrew. Um, that's really all it is. And while the movie, when the credits start to roll, it does say, well, we've changed some things to uh sort of like, help us with the narrative of the film. What they don't tell you is that, yeah, we did see Prince Andrew being interviewed. You can still pull it up on YouTube, the complete interview, which basically he thought he was clearing his name. And in reality, we were able to see uh, a better, or let's say, have a better perspective of how Prince Andrew is, even when he's trying to be at his best, he fails. I don't think we need a movie to show us what you could see on YouTube. In one of my books, Jeffrey Epstein, Predator Spy, I have the complete transcript, which I may post somewhere for you guys to have free access to. Films like this and so-called documentaries annoy the hell out of me. Those of you who follow my work and who subscribe to, especially my Substack, where I've been working on a series, Deconstructing Wexner, know that I not only delve into the fact that, yeah, we heard from Alexander Acosta. I was told he was above my pay grade, referring to Epstein, and that's it, to back off, right? Hence the non-prosecution agreement. What neither this new 2024 British movie, directed by Philip Martin and starring Gillian Anderson, Keely Hawes, Billy Piper, and Rufus Sewell, none of these people, by the way, whom I've ever seen before. What I really dislike about these documentaries and movies, and I guess we're going to see a whole bunch of these things, is that they do not tell you how the intelligence agencies such as CIA, Mossad, MI5, MI6 are in fact behind, let's say, an Epstein. And by the way, there's nothing really about Epstein in here. If you think you're going to get an insight into Epstein, no. They find someone who sort of they make to look a little bit like Epstein, and he's only shown, let's see it, like through the eyes of the photographer who takes a photograph of Epstein coming out of a fake townhouse. This is not even the real townhouse. I guess they couldn't get access to it, but it's not even close to looking like Epstein's 71st Street mansion, which I don't know, maybe that's what they were referring to, but they could have been referring to the whole film as far as I'm concerned. And then they focus on that photograph that we've seen a million times of Andrew and Epstein walking in Central Park in December of 2010, right after Epstein comes out of prison several months before. And again, part-time prison. That's really all you see of so-called Epstein. Primarily, we see an overweight man, very aging, kind of like Andrew. So they kind of did a good job with the casting as far as Andrew is concerned. We see an aging guy who has aged prematurely, who's very much a mama's boy, with the double chin and the whole thing, and all the teddy bears on his bed. We see that in the film, but we all knew this before. So again, we don't get into the real subtext of the fact that this is a multi-generational slip up. I'm going to call it a slip up because Epstein was never supposed to be exposed. He's part of a multi-generational intelligence operation that in my series, Deconstructing Wexner, I detail from, let's say, 1917, when when Wexner's mother's parents, so when Wexner's grandparents come from Russia to the United States. And I go into detail about the secret societies, the devil worshiping, how it's connected to the world of, let's say, someone like Michael Aquino, Anton LaVey, how it's connected to that world, which through Michael Aquino, we know is connected to the psychological warfare that was used in Vietnam, but it's also been used within the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in Canada, throughout the world. The psychological manipulation of our culture, like be it music or in Leslie Wexner's case, through the clothing that he manufactured, through the Victoria's Secret spin that he put in there, through the intentional twisting of the role of children into highly sexualized miniature women to be exploited. A world that Gloria Steinem, who was part of this group, this subculture, she infiltrated, as many of you know, the women's liberation movement for horrific reasons that I'm not going to go into at this podcast. So that this film, Scoop, is another layer of what will become the narrative of, quote, the Epstein story, or maybe of Prince Andrew. And again, not even a sliver of the truth comes out, because we all saw the interview. You can watch it on YouTube, just pull it up. I mean, we all knew he was lying. Right after the interview is when Buckingham Palace finally had the wherewithal to put out a statement that He was withdrawing from public duty, and then very quickly he was stripped of his titles. But all of this stuff, again, even from Buckingham Palace, is superficial, because nothing really changed with the dynamic that Andrew has within the family. He hasn't been kicked out of the family. We just saw pictures of him with his family going to Easter, going to the church service during Easter. Nothing has really changed. The monarchy has been in decline for a very long time. And I don't think I have to remind you that their original name was not Windsor, right? They're of German ancestry, the same German ancestry who created Adolf Hitler. Hitler, that nice guy who, put thousands and thousands and thousands of women, children, and innocent men into gas chambers. That same mentality is part of the intelligence aspect, which created this. It's sort of like a cabal of, I would say, if I were to give you a tally off the top of my head, approximately 60 men. Still, there are no women in that cabal, who basically create what is commonly known as the deep state, and I call it the overstate, because their fingers, while it's not legal, are mixed into what happens with all of us, what we can learn or not learn in school, what we see in the movies, what we listen to on the radio. So anyway, nothing in this film Scoop goes into the intelligence aspect, nor will it. I mean, and that's primarily my work, and that's what I have been doing and sharing via my Substack, via my Patreon. And it's funny because I just took a break to do this for you, and I'm in the middle of writing part 9. I'm almost done with part 9. Hopefully it'll be up by tomorrow morning. And even I'm surprised because, I go deep into history. I'm peeling off the layers, and I'll just give you like a preview. Andy Warhol, as I have mentioned in some of my podcasts that are on, it's a patron only podcast, was a creation of CIA. Well, he also produced the first porn film that sort of helped kick off the slew of pornographic films. And it was no coincidence that the law changed at the time, allowing these films to be shown, creating an atmosphere where women who were about to be liberated by the likes of Gloria Steinem were going to be perceived as sluts. All of us, right? Our children too. Where our family unit was going to be torn apart because, oh, it's better to take the family unit and tear it apart, because then you have a weaker group of men and a much weaker group of women that you can manipulate much easier. And then those children, they're marginalized, right? Because they're not living in the manner that generations before us were able to live. Like during the 1950s, we had the nuclear family. It was a much stronger unit. CIA decided, hey, we need to get rid of this nuclear family. And so they took several steps to ensure that we were separate, that we fight each other, and to objectify women and eventually children. which is what's happened and why there's so much chaos. You know, they introduced the concept of chaos. That word is sometimes applied only, I've noticed, to someone like Charles Manson, but it can be applied to our entire culture because our entire culture is constantly suppressed. We are suppressed. It's one catastrophe after another after another. We are in a constant state of chaos, and no one really addresses this. So, like, while I've been working on part 9, you know, I share a historical family insight tidbits of this group of people who have been used as puppets by the overlords who, through their work, like let's say Andy Warhol, who created, don't forget, he is the co-founder of the New York Academy of Art, where Jeffrey Epstein sat on the board, I believe, for 16 years. And if you look at the art that's produced by the New York Academy of Art by, let's say, someone like Eric Fisher or something like that, I think his name is Fisher. I could be wrong with his last name, but his first name is certainly Eric. It's all about children interacting inappropriately with adults. That is the kind of work that is produced, if you want to call it work. I call it the kidnapping of your mind. It's sort of, if you see something enough, it becomes normal. So that what we talk about as it pertains to Epstein is that P word, right? Well, that's permeated our collective countries and our minds for a long time. And I think I've shared with you via my books and my articles that even Nabokov's Lolita was a book that was sponsored and paid for by CIA. And if you didn't know that before, well, wake up to the fact that it was sponsored by CIA. You know, when you have a 12-year-old little nymphette, courtesy of CIA, you know, but will a movie like Scoop, quote, based on the real life of Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, ever tell you stuff like this? Don't hold your breath, because that's never going to happen. Anyway, again, I hope to have part 9, Deconstructing Wexner, drop tomorrow morning. Those of you who are there, thank you for your support. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. If you're on the fence, join, because that's where, as I said in my podcast of yesterday, I am uncensored. Hooray, hooray. And I can tell you what I know from the bits of information that I learned firsthand by being the slave to one of these masters of the universe, right? Because they're all interconnected, and it's, again, multi-generational. And I really don't know if anyone else, and not to brag, but I don't know if anyone else who's doing the kind of work that I'm doing. There are a few people that I respect their insights. One of those is Professor Hamamoto. You know, current. I don't know that I necessarily respect anyone else's work, because all it really has been, and I've looked at it from time to time, is just the copying and the pasting of somebody else's work of information that it has been public. You know, you just have to look for it. That's what I've seen. I haven't seen real investigative work. Professor Hamamoto's contributions, and if you're not a member of his Patreon and or his YouTube channel, look him up. He does cultural forensics. He even went as far as to trademark that term. So he studies, literally studies a certain book, compares it to what was happening culturally at the time, and he arrives to some interesting conclusions. Yes, he does a lot of freestyle talk, which you should really be grateful for, because he shares with you some of his firsthand observations during the 1960s, during the 1970s. And by the way, he's a third generation American. So every now and then when I hear someone refer to him as, quote, that Japanese podcaster, I personally am insulted. He's as American as any of us. I mean, this is a country of immigrants. So I do get insulted. Sorry, that's just the way I feel. And with you guys, I consider most of you my friends. You've been following my work for years, so that I feel that I can confide stuff in you that perhaps somebody who's new to my channel and who's new to my work may not know about me. That said, have a great weekend, guys. Talk soon. Bye.